The fluorescent lights of CIA headquarters hummed their eternal song, casting pale shadows across Sarah Donovan's desk at 3:47 in the morning. She'd been staring at the same encrypted file for 6 hours, her coffee, long cold, her eyes burning from the blue glow of dual monitors that illuminated her cubicle like a confessional booth. The file was labeled Cold War Archive 1987 Berlin Redacted. Just another relic from the age of analog spies and nuclear anxiety, one of thousands she'd been tasked with digitizing and cataloging for the agency's historical database. Boring work, safe work, the kind of work that let her sleep at night, until she saw the photograph. It emerged from the digital static like a ghost materializing in fog. Black and white grainy taken from a surveillance camera, positioned somewhere in East Berlin. The image showed a man in his 30s, lean and angular, disappearing into the shadows of a Stasi checkpoint. The photo quality was terrible. The angle was worse, but Sarah knew that jawline. She knew the way he held his shoulders, the particular tilt of his head when he was thinking. She knew because she'd inherited both. Her finger hovered over the mouse, trembling slightly. With 2 clicks, she enhanced the image, adjusted the contrast, applied facial recognition protocols that were strictly above her clearance level. She didn't care. The algorithms worked their magic, stripping away decades and pixels and uncertainty. Match probability, 93.7%. Subject, James Michael Donovan. Status, deceased, 1998. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her father. Dead for 28 years, killed in a car accident when she was 8 years old. That's what her mother had told her. That's what the death certificate said. That's what she'd believed through childhood grief and teenage anger and adult acceptance. But dead men don't appear in CIA surveillance photos from 1987. She scrolled through the file with shaking hands. More photos, more evidence. Each one capturing the same man in different European cities. Prague, Budapest, Vienna. Always in the shadows. Always alone. Always with that same careful predatory grace. Then she found the operational designation. Codename Cleaner. Primary function, asset termination and problem resolution. Operations completed 47. Handler classified. Current status. Deep cover location unknown. Sarah felt the walls of her cubicle closing in. Asset termination. That was the polite phrase. The bureaucratic language that let politicians sleep at night. But she'd worked for the agency long enough to know what it really meant. Her father had been an assassin. She printed nothing. Saved nothing to her workstation. Instead, she transferred the files to an encrypted thumb drive buried in a sequence of ghost directories that would take even the NSA weeks to untangle. Then she cleared her screen, locked her terminal, and walked through the empty corridors of Langley like a woman in a dream. The parking garage was silent except for the echo of her footsteps on concrete. Her hands fumbled with her car keys. She needed to think. She needed to breathe. She needed to Sarah Donovan. The voice came from behind a concrete pillar, rough as gravel, carrying the weight of military command. Sarah's training kicked in before her fear could. She dropped into a defensive stance, right hand reaching for the Glock she didn't carry, left hand moving to cover her center line. A man emerged from the shadows. Late 60s, maybe 70, with iron gray hair, cut military short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from old leather. He wore civilian clothes, but they hung on him wrong like a uniform in disguise. His eyes were the pale blue of Arctic ice, and they studied her with the kind of attention that missed nothing. "Easy," he said, raising both hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because you just kicked over a hornet's nest that's been dormant for 30 years. Sarah didn't relax. "Who are you?" "Colonel Frank Russo, retired, Army Intelligence. 68 years old and still cleaning up messes for people who should know better." He smiled without humor. "And before you ask, yes, I still have friends in the building. Friends who sent me a very interesting alert about 15 minutes ago regarding a certain file being accessed by a certain junior analyst who doesn't have clearance for anything above secret." Sarah's mind raced. "I'm calling security." "No, you're not." Russo's voice softened but lost none of its authority. "Because if you do that, you'll spend the next 6 months in an interrogation room explaining why you were poking around in files related to the cleaner. And then they'll bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again. Is that what you want?" "I want the truth." "The truth." Russo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is complicated, Sarah. The truth is that your father isn't dead. The truth is that he's in danger. And the truth is that you're the only person who can help him." The parking garage seemed to tilt beneath Sarah's feet. She leaned against her car, feeling the cold metal through her blazer. "You're lying." "I wish I were." Russo moved closer but kept his distance, respecting her space. James Donovan was one of the best operatives the agency ever had. From 1975 to 1989, he handled problems that couldn't be handled any other way. Not because he was cruel, not because he enjoyed it, but because he was willing to carry the weight that nobody else could. He killed people. He eliminated threats to national security. Russo's voice was hard now, uncompromising. Soviet sleeper agents, defectors who'd turned double, moles who'd sold American intelligence to the KGB. Each one of those 47 operations saved lives, Sarah. Maybe hundreds of lives, maybe thousands. That's the math of the Cold War. That's the world your father lived in. Sarah closed her eyes. She saw her father as she remembered him, the man who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd read her stories at bedtime, who'd made her pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse every Sunday morning. That man couldn't be a killer. That man couldn't be, why did he disappear? Her voice was barely a whisper. Because the KGB found out who he was. Russo pulled a cigarette from his pocket, didn't light it, just held it like a talisman. 1989, right before the wall came down. He retired from operations, lived quietly with your mother and you for 9 years trying to be a normal father. But in 98, the past caught up. The KGB finally tracked him down. The agency had two choices: extract him and risk exposing our entire network, or let him disappear. They chose option 3. They made him a ghost. They faked his death. Car accident on Route 50 just outside Arlington, closed casket. Your mother knew, she had to know. The agency gave her a choice: keep the secret and keep you safe, or tell the truth and watch both of you disappear into witness protection for the rest of your lives. She chose you, Sarah. She always chose you. The memory hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her mother, Helen Donovan, standing at that closed casket in her black dress, not crying, just staring at the polished wood, with eyes that saw something Sarah couldn't understand. She'd thought it was grief. Now she knew it was something else entirely. Goodbye mixed with see you later. Where is he? Sarah demanded. Russo finally lit his cigarette, took a long drag, exhaled smoke into the fluorescent-lit darkness. Shenandoah Valley. Little town called Woodbridge, about 2 hours west of here. He's been living there for 28 years under the name James Mitchell. Runs a custom furniture shop. Makes chairs and tables for people who think handcrafted means something. Lives alone. Keeps his head down. Until now. What's changed? Everything. Russo's face went grim. There's a man named Viktor Volkov, former KGB, now runs a network out of Brighton Beach. 3 months ago, he acquired something called the Cold List, a complete database of every CIA operative who worked behind the Iron Curtain between 1970 and 1990. Names, cover identities, operational histories. Everything. Sarah felt sick. How many names? 217. Most of them are already dead. Natural causes mostly. But about 40 are still alive, still under deep cover, still keeping secrets that could destabilize international relations if they came out. Your father's name is at the top of that list, Sarah, and Volkov is selling it to the highest bidder. How long? 72 hours, maybe less. Russo dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot. The agency knows they're scrambling, but they can't move officially because half those operatives don't exist on paper anymore. It's a mess, political nightmare. So they're sitting on their hands while good people die. Then why are you here? Russo met her eyes. Because your father saved my life once. Berlin, 1988. I was a young intelligence officer, too cocky, too green. Got myself caught in a honey trap, woke up in a Stasi cell with a gun to my head. The agency had already written me off as compromised. They'd sent the cleaner to handle the problem. Sarah understood. They sent him to kill you. They did. But James Donovan did something that night that proved he wasn't just a killer. He investigated first. He found evidence that I'd been set up, that I was innocent. So instead of putting a bullet in my brain, he got me out. Killed 3 Stasi officers in the process. Risked his entire cover to save one stupid lieutenant who'd gotten in over his head. Russo's voice cracked just slightly. I owe him my life, Sarah. I owe him my career. I owe him 40 years of marriage and 3 grandchildren. And every morning I wake up and remember that I'm alive. So when I heard that someone was hunting him, when I heard that his daughter had just stumbled onto the truth, I knew I had to help. Question is, are you ready to help him? Sarah thought about the life she'd built. The careful, controlled, predictable life of a CIA analyst who worked 9 to 5 and went home to an empty apartment and pretended that she was satisfied with safety. She thought about her father living alone in the mountains carrying secrets that weighed more than most people could imagine. She thought about her mother who'd loved them both enough to live with the lie. I'm ready, Sarah said. What do I do? Russo smiled, and for the first time Sarah saw warmth in those Arctic eyes. First, you go home, get some sleep. You're going to need it. Second, you call in sick tomorrow. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Third, you meet me at 5 a.m. at the Fairfax rest stop on I-66. Bring clothes for 3 days. Bring your weapon if you have one. Don't bring your phone. They'll track me. Let them. By the time they figure out what you're doing, we'll already be done. Russo turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Sarah. When you meet your father, don't expect the man you remember. 28 years is a long time. People change. Ghosts especially. Then he was gone, melting back into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. Sarah stood alone in the parking garage for a long time, listening to the hum of ventilation systems and the distant wail of sirens somewhere in the Virginia night. Her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor. Everything okay? Saw you left early? She typed back, fine. Just tired. See you tomorrow. A lie. But what was one more lie in a life built on them? She drove home on autopilot, her mind 1,000 miles away. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in. She packed mechanically jeans, tactical boots, a dark jacket. Her service weapon, a Glock 19 still in its box from qualification training. She'd fired it twice at the range. Never in anger, never at a person. Maybe that was about to change. Sleep didn't come. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows move as cars passed outside her window. She thought about calling someone, a friend, a colleague. Anyone who could tell her that this was insane, that she was throwing away her career, that she should report Russo and forget everything she'd learned. But she didn't, because buried beneath the fear and confusion there was something else. Something that had been missing from her life for 28 years, hope. At 4:30 a.m., Sarah grabbed her bag and left her apartment for what might be the last time. The drive to Fairfax took 40 minutes through pre-dawn darkness. Russo was waiting in a beaten Ford pickup that looked like it had survived 2 wars and a flood. He didn't say anything, just nodded as she climbed in. They drove west as the sun broke over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Russo chain-smoked and listened to old country music on a radio that crackled with static. Sarah watched the landscape change from urban sprawl to farmland to forest, each mile taking her further from the life she knew. Woodbridge was the kind of town that time forgot. One main street lined with brick buildings from the 1920s. A diner called Maggie's that advertised breakfast all day. A hardware store with faded paint and a creaking sign. And at the end of a dirt road that wound up into the hills, a workshop with smoke rising from its chimney. Russo killed the engine. That's it. Mitchell's Fine Furniture. Your father's there now. He starts work at 6 every morning. Never takes a day off, never takes a break. Just works like a man, trying to forget. Sarah's hand was on the door handle. What do I say to him? The truth. It's the only thing that matters now. Russo pulled out a pistol, checked the magazine, handed it to her. Take this, just in case. Your Glock is good, but this is better. Sig Sauer Piece, 15 rounds, same gun your father carried in Berlin. Sarah took the weapon, felt its weight, its purpose. Will he remember me? He never forgot you, Sarah. Not for one day. That's been his curse. She got out of the truck. The morning air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. She could hear a saw running somewhere inside the workshop, its rhythm steady and hypnotic. She walked toward the sound, each step feeling like it carried the weight of decades. The door was open. Inside, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished furniture, a man worked with his back to her. He was tall, lean, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of long practice. His hair was gray now, pulled back in a ponytail. His hands were scarred and calloused. But when he turned, when he saw her standing in his doorway, his face was exactly as she remembered. Just older, and infinitely more tired. Hello, Dad, Sarah said. James Donovan froze. The saw in his hand clattered to the workbench. For a moment, he just stared at her, and Sarah saw 100 emotions cross his face in the span of a heartbeat. Shock, fear, joy, grief, love. Then he said very quietly, you shouldn't be here. I know. It's not safe. I know that too. Sarah, his voice broke on her name, and suddenly he wasn't the cleaner anymore. Wasn't the ghost from the Cold War files. He was just a father looking at a daughter he'd thought he'd never see again. I found your file, Sarah said. I know what you were. I know what you did. And I know that someone's coming for you. James closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. The weariness was still there, but beneath it was something harder. Something that had been sleeping for a long time. How long do I have? 72 hours, maybe less. He nodded like this was something he'd been expecting. Like he'd been waiting for this moment for 28 years. There's coffee in the back. We should talk. There are things you need to understand. They sat in the small office behind the workshop, surrounded by furniture sketches and catalogs. James poured coffee into chipped mugs. His hands were steady now, controlled. The hands of a man who'd learned to manage fear. Your mother knew, he said. Everything. She knew before she married me. The agency wanted me to stay alone, stay isolated. But Helen was stubborn. She said she didn't care what I'd done, didn't care what I was. She said she loved the man I was trying to become. Did you love her? More than anything, more than the work, more than my own life. James stared into his coffee. When you were born, I went to my handler and said I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be the cleaner and be your father. Couldn't teach you to ride a bike with blood on my hands. They let me retire in '89. We had 9 years, Sarah, 9 good years. I thought the past was buried. But it wasn't. It never is. His hands clenched around the mug. In '98, the KGB found me. Don't know how, don't know who talked, but they came. Your mother and I had 30 minutes to decide. The agency offered witness protection for all of us, but Helen refused. Said you deserved a normal life. Said I had to disappear so you could stay. Sarah felt tears threatening, but pushed them back. Did you ever regret it? Every single day. James looked at her, and Sarah saw the depth of his pain. I watched you grow up from a distance, had friends send me pictures, heard about your graduation, your acceptance to Georgetown, your recruitment by the agency. I was so proud and so terrified. Because you were following in my footsteps, Sarah. You were choosing the life that destroyed me. I chose analysis, not operations. Same world, same secrets, same lies. He set down his coffee. Why are you here, Sarah, really? You could have reported what you found, could have let the agency handle this. Why risk your career to warn a ghost? Sarah thought about all the years she'd spent angry at a father who'd abandoned her, all the birthdays he'd missed, all the moments he should have been there for. She thought about her mother carrying the weight of his secret until cancer took her. She thought about the photograph in the file, the man in the shadows who'd done terrible things for reasons she was only beginning to understand. Because you're my father, she said simply, and I think I'm starting to understand the choices you made. James smiled, but it was sad. Don't understand them too quickly. Don't forgive them too easily. I don't deserve that. A sound interrupted them, the crack of a branch breaking outside. Too loud to be an animal, too close to be an accident. James was on his feet before Sarah could react. He moved to the window, peered out through a gap in the curtains, and his body went absolutely still. When he turned back to her, the father was gone. In his place was something else, something cold and professional and very, very dangerous. 3 men, he said, his voice calm. Eastern European, probably Russian, armed with submachine guns. They're surrounding the building. Classic kill team formation. Sarah's hand went to the Sig Sauer at her. How did they find you so fast? They didn't. They've been watching, waiting for something to change in my routine. James moved to the workbench, pressed a hidden release. A section of the wall swung open, revealing an arsenal that would make a military armory jealous. Rifles, pistols, grenades, body armor. Everything carefully maintained, oiled, ready. They saw you arrive. They know I've been compromised. Now they're moving. He tossed Sarah a tactical vest, grabbed a rifle for himself. Put this on. Stay behind me. When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. There's a bunker in the woods 500 yards north. Code is 0913. Your birthday. You hole up there until Russo can extract you. What about you? James chambered around. I'm going to remind them why they used to call me the cleaner. The first man kicked in the front door. He was good, moving with a military precision, weapon up and ready. But James was better. Had been doing this longer. Had survived when better men hadn't. The rifle cracked once. The man dropped. The workshop exploded into chaos. Gunfire shattered windows. Bullets chewed through wood and drywall. Sarah dove behind a workbench, her heart hammering, her training taking over. She could hear James moving through the space like he'd choreographed this dance 1,000 times. Each shot was precise. Each movement was economy itself. Another body fell. Then another. But there were more coming. Sarah could hear them outside calling to each other in Russian. At least 6 more, maybe 8. They'd come prepared. They'd come for war. James appeared beside her, breathing hard. He had blood on his shirt, but it wasn't his. Change of plans. We go together. Out the back, through the woods. We have maybe 30 seconds before they flank us. I can fight. I know you can. He pressed a pistol into her hands. But not today. Today you learn to survive. Come on. They burst through the back door into morning sunlight that felt obscene after the darkness of violence. The forest was 50 yards away. It might as well have been 50 miles. Bullets kicked up dirt around their feet. Sarah ran faster than she'd ever run, her lungs burning. James beside her, both of them moving with the desperate speed of prey. They made the trees, kept running. Behind them, the workshop erupted in flames. Someone had thrown an incendiary, erasing evidence, erasing history, erasing the quiet life that James had built one board at a time. They ran until Sarah's legs gave out, collapsing behind a fallen log deep in the forest. She could hear pursuit, closer than she wanted. James checked his weapon, his face expressionless. I counted 8 more, he said. Professional, well-equipped. This isn't random, Sarah. Someone sent a message. What message? That they know who I am, what I was, and that they're not afraid. He looked at her, and Sarah saw something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not anger, but something like relief. I've been running for 28 years. Part of me is glad it's finally over. It's not over until we make it out. He smiled. You sound like your mother. The sound of footsteps grew louder. James grabbed Sarah's hand. Follow my lead. Stay quiet. And Sarah, yeah, I'm sorry for everything, for leaving, for not being there, for bringing this into your life. I'm so sorry. Before Sarah could answer, before she could tell him that she understood, that she forgave him, that she needed him, the forest erupted with gunfire once again, and the real war began. The bunker smelled of earth and old concrete, a relic from a time when the world lived under the shadow of nuclear annihilation. James had led them here through 3 miles of dense forest, moving like a man half his age, checking their 6 every 100 yards, erasing their tracks with branches and careful footwork. Sarah had followed in silence, her body screaming, her mind cataloging every lesson in real-time survival. Colonel Russo was waiting inside, along with enough weapons and supplies to stage a small war. He looked up as they entered, took in their condition with one sweep of his eyes, and handed them both water bottles without a word. How many did you drop? He asked James. 3 confirmed. Maybe wounded 2 more. James stripped off his blood-spattered shirt, revealing a roadmap of scars across his torso. Each one told a story Sarah would never hear. They came prepared, Frank. Military-grade hardware, encrypted communications. These weren't street thugs. Someone sent professionals. Volkov's moving faster than we thought. Russo unfolded a tactical map across a makeshift table. I've been monitoring chatter. He's not just selling the cold list, he's using it, sending kill teams to eliminate high-value targets before the auction, proving the list is genuine by leaving bodies. Sarah's voice was steady, though her hands still shook. How many targets? 12 so far, all former operatives, dead within the last 72 hours. Your father was number 13. Russo looked at James. Your famous brother, the cleaner's head, would be worth a fortune. Proof of concept for the buyers. James pulled on a clean shirt, began field stripping his rifle with the automatic motions of muscle memory. Then we take the fight to him. Where's his operation centered? Baltimore. Warehouse district near the harbor. But it's a fortress. Private security, surveillance, the works. We'd need a team, equipment, time we don't have. We have 3 people and whatever's in this bunker. James looked at Sarah. And we have someone Volkov doesn't know about. Someone on the inside. Sarah understood immediately. You want me to go back to Langley. I want you to access the agency's files on Volkov. His network, his contacts, his weak points. Everything the official channels won't share because they're too busy covering their asses. James's voice was gentle but firm. You're an analyst, Sarah. One of the best. That's not a weakness. That's our greatest asset. They'll know I accessed those files. They'll burn me. They'll burn you anyway. Russo lit a cigarette, exhaled toward the ventilation shaft. You left Langley, drove to meet a supposedly dead operative, and survived an attack by a Russian kill team. Your career was over the moment you walked into that workshop. Question is, what are you going to do with the time you have left? Sarah thought about her cubicle, her clearance level, her performance reviews. She thought about the life she'd built on the foundation of lies her mother had told her. Safe lies, protective lies, lies that had kept her in the light while her father lived in shadows. She was done with safety. I'll need a secure connection, and I'll need cover for why I'm accessing above my clearance. James smiled and Sarah saw pride in his eyes. I taught Helen how to hack NSA systems back in '83. She taught you, didn't she? All those little tricks she called computer games. The memory hit Sarah like vertigo. Her mother late at night showing her how to navigate systems, how to hide her digital footprints, how to see things that others wanted hidden. She thought they were puzzles, educational games. Now she understood they were lessons, training for a war her mother knew was coming. She taught me everything, Sarah said quietly. Then show me what you learned. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in front of a laptop connected through 7 proxy servers and a satellite uplink that bounced their signal through 4 countries. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, but dancing through firewalls and security protocols that should have been impossible to breach. But Helen Donovan had been very, very good at her job, and she'd made sure her daughter would be better. The files appeared one by one. Viktor Volkov, born Leningrad, 1962, KGB recruitment at 23. Stationed in East Berlin, 1985 through 1991. Defected after the Soviet collapse. Disappeared for 5 years. Resurfaced in Brighton Beach, 2001, running weapons and information with equal efficiency. But it was the next file that made Sarah's blood run cold. He has a partner inside the agency, she said, her voice tight. Someone codenamed Mercury. They've been feeding him intelligence for at least 3 years. Locations of safe houses, identities of deep cover operatives, everything. James leaned over her shoulder, his breath steady against her neck. She could smell gun oil and sweat and something else. Old Spice. The same aftershave he'd worn when she was a child. The scent triggered memories she'd buried. Her father lifting her onto his shoulders, teaching her constellations, reading her The Hobbit in funny voices. She forced the memories down. No time for that now. Can you identify Mercury? James asked. Sarah's fingers worked the keyboard. Give me 10 minutes. It took her 7. The name appeared on screen like an accusation. Deputy Director Robert Morrison. Russo swore. James went very still. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her. Morrison, her direct supervisor, the man who'd approved her security clearance, who'd mentored her through her first year at Langley, who'd attended her mother's funeral and told her that Helen would be proud of the work she was doing. How long? James's voice was ice. Sarah scrolled through the communications logs. First contact was 3 years ago, right after my mother died. She looked at her father. They waited until she was gone, until there was no one left who knew your real identity. Except you. Except me, Brandy. Sarah felt rage building in her chest, hot and clean. He's been using me, watching me, waiting to see if I'd ever stumble onto the truth. And now you have. Russo crushed his cigarette. Which means Morrison knows. Which means Volkov knows. Which means we're running out of time faster than we thought. James moved to the weapons rack, began selecting gear with the careful attention of a surgeon choosing scalpels. Then we move tonight. Hit the warehouse before Volkov can relocate. Sarah gets us the intelligence. Frank handles tactical coordination. I do what I do best. 3 against 30, Russo said. I've had worse odds. In Vietnam, maybe. James smiled without humor. This is different. These are professionals. Former Spetsnaz, probably. Men who've been training for this their whole lives. And what are you? Sarah asked. Her father looked at her, and she saw something ancient in his eyes. Something that had been there long before she was born. Long before he'd learned to build furniture and pretend he was someone else. I'm the man they had nightmares about, James said simply. I'm the reason the KGB put a bounty on my head that could buy a small country. I'm 47 confirmed kills and probably twice that many that never made it into the official record. I'm the ghost that the Soviets whispered about in safe houses from Moscow to Berlin. He loaded a magazine chambered around. I'm the cleaner, and I'm going to remind everyone why that name used to mean something. Through the afternoon, James trained Sarah. Movement, breathing, shot placement. Each lesson compressed essential stripped to survival's core. He was patient but relentless, correcting her stance, adjusting her grip, explaining that survival wasn't about being brave. It was about being smart and being fast and being willing to do what needed to be done. During a break, they sat side by side, cleaning weapons in comfortable silence. Your mother asked me once if I regretted what I did, James said. All those operations, all those targets. She wanted to know if I felt guilty. What did you tell her? I told her the truth, that every person I eliminated was someone who'd made a choice to betray their country, a choice to sell secrets that would get good people killed, a choice to put their own interests above everything else. He set down his cleaning rod, looked at his scarred hands. I didn't kill innocents, Sarah. I killed monsters. And I made sure they knew why they were dying. Did it help knowing they deserved it? No. His voice was barely a whisper. Because at the end of the day, I was still the one pulling the trigger. I was still the one who had to live with their faces. Still the one who couldn't sleep without seeing them. Knowing they deserved it just meant I couldn't even hate myself properly. Sarah understood then, understood why he'd disappeared, why he'd given up everything to build furniture in the mountains, why he'd stayed away from her for 28 years. He hadn't been protecting her from his enemies. He'd been protecting her from himself. I killed 2 men today, Sarah said quietly. In the forest, you were reloading, and they came around the tree line, and I just reacted. 2 shots, both center mass. They were dead before they hit the ground. How do you feel? Sick, scared, angry. She met his eyes, but not guilty. They were trying to kill us. They made their choice. I made mine. James pulled her close, wrapped an arm around her shoulders the way he used to when she had nightmares as a child. You're stronger than I was at your age. Stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Your mother knew. She always said you had steel in your spine. She never told me about you, not really. I spent years hating you for abandoning us. Good. That's what she wanted. Better to hate a dead man than worry about a living ghost. He released her, stood up. But now you know the truth. And knowing changes everything. You can't go back to Langley, Sarah. Can't go back to your apartment. Can't go back to the life you had. After tonight, you'll be burned. Marked. Everything you worked for will be gone. Then I better make it count. They moved out at 1900 hours, 3 ghosts in a Ford pickup that had seen better decades. Russo drove. James rode shotgun checking weapons with the automatic focus of ritual. Sarah sat in the back, laptop balanced on her knees, monitoring communications traffic for any sign they'd been compromised. The drive to Baltimore took 90 minutes through gathering darkness. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. Each of them was locked in their own preparation, their own private meditation on what was coming. Sarah wondered if her mother had felt this same cold clarity before an operation. Wondered if this was the feeling Helen had been running from when she'd chosen safety over truth, when she'd pushed James away and built a normal life from the wreckage of secrets. The warehouse district was exactly as ugly as the satellite photos had promised. Abandoned factories and rusting cranes, puddles of oily water, reflecting sodium lights, the kind of place where bodies disappeared and nobody asked questions. Volkov had chosen well. In this neighborhood, gunfire was just another sound in the symphony of urban decay. Russo Park 3 blocks away killed the lights. They geared up in silence, tactical vests, night vision, communications equipment. Sarah felt the weight of it, all the physical burden of violence, and wondered how her father had carried it for 14 years. We go in 3 teams, James said, his voice steady through the comm system. Frank takes the south entrance. I take north. Sarah provides overwatch from the parking structure across the street. You're our eyes and our early warning. You see trouble, you call it. You see a shot, you take it. Understood. Understood. And Sarah, James looked at her in the darkness. If this goes wrong, if we don't make it out, I need you to know something. Don't, we're all making it out. Listen to me. His voice was fierce, now urgent. Every day I stayed away from you was torture. Every birthday I missed, every graduation, every moment I should have been there. It destroyed me, but I'd do it again. I'd do it 1,000 times. Because keeping you safe was the only thing that mattered. You understand me? You were always the mission. Everything else was just noise. Sarah's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. I understand. Good. He checked his rifle one last time. Now let's go kill some bad guys. They moved through the warehouse district like smoke, 3 separate shadows converging on a single point. Sarah took position on the 4th floor of the parking structure, set up her rifle with the careful precision James had taught her. Through the scope, she could see the warehouse. Guards on the roof, more at the entrances, patrol patterns that rotated every 8 minutes. She counted 20 visible targets. God knew how many more inside. Sarah, you have the eye. Russo's voice crackled in her ear. Call it. She took a breath, steadied herself, became what she needed to be. South entrance, 2 guards. North entrance, 3 guards. Rooftop, 4 sentries. Patrolled vehicle 2 minutes out on the west side. You have a 7-minute window starting now. James and Russo moved. Sarah watched through the scope, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The guards never saw them coming. James took the north entrance with brutal efficiency. 3 suppressed press shots, 3 bodies falling. Russo mirrored him on the south. Clean, professional, no wasted motion. Then they were inside and Sarah was alone with her scope and her racing heart. The minutes crawled past. She heard gunfire over the comm system. Short bursts, controlled chaos. Russo's voice, second floor clear. James, found the server room. Sarah, I'm uploading the cold list now. Stand by. Sarah monitored the surrounding streets. The patrol vehicle was early coming back around. She keyed her mic. Heads up, patrol returning, 2 minutes. Copy that. James's breathing was labored. We've got company in here, more than we expected. At least 20 hostiles converging on our position. Can you extract? Working on it. The patrol vehicle stopped outside the warehouse. 4 men got out, weapons ready. They'd heard something, sensed something. Sarah watched them through her scope, calculating angles, distance, wind. She could take 2 before they scattered. Maybe 3 if she was lucky. But that would reveal her position. Make her a target, James's voice in her ear. Sarah, if we don't make it, destroy the laptop. All the evidence, don't let them trace this back to you. Not happening. That's an order. I don't take orders from dead men. Sarah acquired her first target. And you're not dying today. She fired. The first guard dropped. The second spun, searching for the shooter. Sarah's second shot took him in the chest. The remaining 2 scattered, but they were confused, disoriented. They didn't know where the threat was coming from. Russo's voice, Sarah, you just painted a target on yourself. I know. She was already moving, breaking down her rifle, grabbing her gear. The rooftop sentries had spotted her muzzle flash. They were calling it in. I'm relocating. Keep moving. She ran down 4 flights of stairs, burst out onto the street, and found herself face to face with 3 men who'd been circling to flank the parking structure. They raised their weapons. Sarah's training took over. She dropped, rolled, came up firing. 3 sharp cracks split the air. 3 bodies fell. Her hands were shaking now. Not from fear, from adrenaline. From the terrible clarity of knowing she'd just killed 3 more human beings and felt nothing but satisfaction that they'd fallen before she did. This was what her father had lived with. This hollow place where morality used to be. She ran toward the warehouse, staying low, moving through shadows. Inside, she could hear the firefight intensifying. James and Russo were pinned down. She had to help, had to do something. The side entrance was unguarded. Everyone had moved to the main battle. Sarah slipped inside her weapon up, moving through corridors stacked with crates and shipping containers, following the sound of gunfire like a beacon. She found them on the 2nd floor, trapped behind a makeshift barricade, taking fire from 3 directions. James was bleeding from his shoulder. Russo had a cut across his forehead. They were running out of ammunition. Sarah didn't think. She flanked right, came up behind the eastern position, and opened fire. 4 hostiles went down before they even realized she was there. James used the confusion to break left, his rifle singing its lethal song. Russo pushed center, his movements, those of a man half his age, driven by muscle memory and old wars. In 30 seconds, it was over. 15 bodies, cordite thick in the air. The silence after violence, deafening and terrible. James stared at her, blood streaming from his shoulder. I told you to stay in Overwatch. And I told you I don't take orders from ghosts. Sarah helped him to his feet. Did you get the list of Wamas? All of it. Every name, every location, every operation. It's uploading to a secure server as we speak. He grimaced in pain. But we've got a problem. Volkov wasn't here. This was a decoy location. The real auction is happening somewhere else. Russo swore. Then we just wasted our time and blew our only tactical advantage. Not necessarily, a voice echoed from the shadows. Accented, Russian, amused. You found exactly what I wanted you to find. Viktor Volkov stepped into view, flanked by 6 men with automatic weapons. He was smaller than Sarah expected. 60s gray hair, expensive suit. He looked like someone's grandfather. Like a man who'd lived a full life and had nothing left to prove. Except his eyes. His eyes were the eyes of a predator who'd survived by being smarter, faster, more ruthless than everything else in his ecosystem. James Donovan, Volkov said almost affectionately. The famous cleaner. I've wanted to meet you for 30 years. Do you remember Budapest, 1987? You killed my partner. Shot him through a hotel window from 800 meters. Beautiful work. Clean. Professional. James didn't respond. His rifle was empty. They were surrounded. This was it. But Volkov held up a hand, stopping his men from firing. I'm not here to kill you, James. I'm here to make you understand something. You see this warehouse, this operation, it was bait. The cold list you just uploaded, worthless. Old intelligence. Half those people are already dead or relocated. The real list, the one with current locations, current identities. That's somewhere you'll never find it. Then why let us get this far, James asked. Because I wanted to prove a point to my buyers, that even the legendary cleaner could be manipulated, that your skills, impressive as they are, belong to a bygone era. Volkov smiled. You're a dinosaur, James, and dinosaurs don't survive extinction events. You're wrong about one thing, James said quietly. What's that? I didn't upload the cold list. He reached into his vest, pulled out a small device. I uploaded a virus, one that's currently spreading through every system connected to your network. Your financial records, your client database, your communications. All of it burning as we speak. Volkov's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? James pressed a button on the device. Somewhere in the building, servers began to scream. I learned a long time ago, if you can't win, make sure nobody else can either. Then he pressed another button and the warehouse exploded. Sarah felt hands grab her, drag her toward cover. Russo moving through smoke and chaos, pulling both her and James toward an emergency exit they'd scouted before entry. They burst into the night as the building collapsed behind them, ran through streets filled with sirens, and screaming, found their truck and drove into darkness while Baltimore burned orange against the night sky. Nobody spoke for 10 miles. Finally, Russo broke the silence. You rigged the whole building while Sarah was hacking their systems. James winced, pressing his wounded shoulder. Set shaped charges on load-bearing columns. Figured if we couldn't get the real list, we could at least destroy his credibility. No buyers want to work with a man who gets his operation burned to the ground. Did we get him? Sarah asked. Is Volkov dead? No. James's voice was certain. Men like Volkov don't die in explosions. They have escape plans, redundancies. But we heard him, destroyed his Baltimore operation, made him look weak in front of his buyers. And we got enough intelligence to know he's working with someone inside the agency. Sarah looked at her father in the dim light of passing streetlights. Blood on his shirt, gray in his hair. 65 years old and still fighting wars that should have ended decades ago. What happens now? She asked. James met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Now we find out who Mercury really is. We expose him. We finish this, because Morrison is just the beginning. Sarah, there's something bigger happening here, something that's been growing in the shadows for years. I have nowhere to go. Yes, you do. James's voice was gentle. You come with me. We find a place to regroup. This time together. This time no more running until we've won. Sarah thought about her apartment in Arlington, her desk at Langley, the life she'd built on foundations that had crumbled the moment she'd opened that encrypted file. All of it was gone now, burned away like the warehouse in Baltimore. But sitting in this truck with her father and a man who'd become family in a single day, Sarah realized something. She wasn't losing her life. She was finally finding it. Okay, she said, let's finish this. Russo drove them into the darkness, three ghosts fleeing toward an uncertain future carrying the weight of secrets that would never be told. Behind them, Baltimore glowed against the sky. Ahead, the road stretched, empty and infinite. And Sarah Donovan, former CIA analyst, daughter of the cleaner, felt something crystallizing inside her. Not completion, not yet, but purpose, the kind that came from knowing exactly what needed to be done and having the courage to do it. The war wasn't over, but they'd just won the first battle. The safe house was a cabin in the Allegheny Mountains, so deep in the wilderness that even GPS seemed uncertain of its existence. Russo had owned it for 40 years, a refuge from wars both foreign and domestic, a place where men who'd seen too much could remember what silence sounded like. They arrived at dawn exhausted and bleeding, the truck's engine ticking as it cooled in the mountain air. Sarah helped James inside while Russo secured the perimeter with the automatic caution of a man who'd survived by never trusting safety. The cabin smelled of pine and dust and old memories, a museum of a life lived in the margins. James collapsed onto a couch that had seen better decades, his face gray with pain and blood loss. Sarah's hands moved with surprising steadiness as she cut away his shirt, assessed the damage. The bullet had gone through clean, missing bone and major arteries by centimeters. Lucky. In their world, lucky meant you got to bleed instead of die. I need to stitch this, she said, her voice clinical. the analyst in her taking over, creating distance from the fact that this was her father's blood on her hands. Helen taught you field medicine too. James managed a weak smile through the pain. She taught me everything. I'm starting to understand that now. Sarah threaded the needle, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. This is going to hurt. Everything hurts at 65. At least this time I know why. She worked in silence, each stitch a small violence, each pull of thread closing wounds that went deeper than flesh. Russo returned, cleared the all safe, and began brewing coffee that smelled like it could strip paint. The mundane ritual of survival. Bleeding, stitching coffee. The liturgy of soldiers. We bought ourselves maybe 24 hours, Russo said, pouring 3 cups. Morrison will be scrambling to contain the Baltimore situation. Volkov will be regrouping. But they'll find us. They always do. Then we use those 24 hours. James sat up, his face tight with pain, but his eyes clear. Sarah, I need you to look at something. He pulled a thumb drive from his pocket, tossed it to her. I didn't just upload a virus last night. I also copied everything I could before the systems went down. Financial records, communications, contacts. It's not complete, but it's enough. Sarah plugged it into her laptop, her fingers dancing across keys. The data unfurled like a flower of corruption, beautiful and terrible in its complexity. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, a network that stretched from Brighton Beach to Moscow to Beijing. And at the center of it all, one name that appeared again and again. Mercury, Deputy Director Robert Morrison. But as Sarah dug deeper, the picture grew more complicated. Morrison wasn't just a trader selling secrets. He was the architect of something larger. Something that had been growing inside the agency for years, a cancer metastasizing in the dark. He's been eliminating witnesses, Sarah said, her voice hollow. Everyone who worked certain operations during the Cold War. Everyone who knew about black sites and extraordinary renditions and all the things the agency wants to forget. He's been using Volkov to clean house. How many? Russo asked. 17 so far, made to look like accidents, natural causes, suicides. But they all worked the same operations. All carried the same secrets. Sarah looked at her father. You weren't just on the cold list because you were famous. You were on it because you were witness to everything. Every dirty operation from 75 to 89. You're the institutional memory they need to destroy. James absorbed this, his face unreadable. Then Morrison's not working for Volkov. Volkov's working for him. And for someone else. Sarah pulled up another file, financial transfers that disappeared into a labyrinth of accounts. Someone inside the government. Someone with the power to authorize this kind of cleansing operation. Someone who wants the past buried so deep it never surfaces. The 3 of them sat in silence, contemplating the enormity of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just about the cold list anymore. This was about rewriting history, erasing evidence, making sure that the sins of previous generations stayed buried with their victims. We can't win this fight, Russo said quietly. Even if we expose Morrison, they'll just replace him with another true believer. The machine is too big, too entrenched. Maybe we're fighting the wrong battle. Sarah's mind was racing, connecting dots, seeing patterns. The analyst in her coming alive despite the exhaustion. We can't destroy the machine, but we can make sure it can't destroy the witnesses. If we get the real cold list to the right people, if we warn everyone on it, if we give them the tools to protect themselves, then Morrison's entire operation becomes pointless. The right people, James repeated. You mean the Ghost Network? Sarah looked at him. You told Russo that you'd reported Morrison to someone 2 years ago, that they'd been watching, planning. So where are they? Why haven't they moved? Because they needed proof, hard evidence that would survive legal scrutiny, and they needed someone inside who could access it. James met her eyes. They needed you, Sarah. Everything that's happened, every file you've accessed, every law you've broken, it's all been leading here, to this moment, to this choice. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're saying I was manipulated, that my finding your file wasn't an accident. I'm saying you were recruited by people who knew you'd do the right thing when it mattered, and people who believed in you more than you believed in yourself. James reached out, took her hand. Helen was part of a network, Sarah. Before she died, she made them promise to watch over you, to guide you when the time came, to make sure you were ready when the truth finally found you. Sarah felt the world shifting beneath her feet. Every decision she'd made, every choice that had felt like rebellion, had been choreographed by her mother from beyond the grave. She should have been angry, should have felt used, but instead she felt something else. Proud. Her mother had known she was strong enough for this, had bet everything on her daughter's courage and integrity and refusal to look away from hard truths. "So what do I do?" Sarah asked. "How do I contact this network?" "You already have." A new voice spoke from the doorway. Sarah spun her hand going to her weapon. But James raised a hand, stayed her. The woman who entered was in her 70s, elegant despite the tactical gear, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime in rooms where power was currency and secrets were treasure. Behind her came four others, all older, all carrying themselves with that same weathered authority. "Sarah Donovan," the woman said. "I'm Elizabeth Graves. I served with your mother at NSA. I was her friend, and I'm here to offer you the same choice we offered her 30 years ago. Join us. Help us protect the people who protected this country, or walk away and let the institutional machinery grind them into dust." Sarah looked at her father, at Russo, at these strangers who knew her mother. "Who are you people?" "We're the ones who didn't disappear," Graves said simply. "We're the operatives and analysts and handlers who survived the Cold War and realized that the game never really ended. It just went underground. We're the institutional conscience that the agency wants to forget, and we're offering you a chance to be part of something that matters. By breaking the law, by operating outside all oversight, by doing what's necessary when the system fails." Graves pulled up a chair, sat down across from Sarah. "Your mother understood this. She spent 20 years feeding us information, helping us protect people like your father. She died knowing that you'd have this choice, and she died believing you'd make the right one. What do you need from me?" "Everything." Graves opened a tablet, showed Sarah a list of names. 217 people whose lives hung in the balance. "We need you to contact every person on the real cold list, the one Volkov is still holding. We've been tracking his movements, intercepting his communications. We know where the list is, but we need time to extract it. Time you'll buy us by preparing these people for extraction. And Morrison, Volkov, we handle them." One of the men spoke up, his accent pure South Boston, his eyes carrying the weight of old battles. "We've been gathering evidence for 2 years. We have enough to bury Morrison and everyone above him. But we need time, and we need Morrison to make one more mistake, one we can't ignore or classify away." Sarah looked at the list. 217 lives, 217 people who'd served their country and been marked for death because they knew too much. She thought about her father bleeding on a couch because he'd made the hard choices when no one else would. She thought about her mother carrying secrets that had slowly killed her. She thought about Russo still fighting wars that should have ended decades ago. "I'll do it," Sarah said, "but I have conditions." Graves smiled. "Name them." "First, my father gets a real retirement. No more running, no more hiding. He's earned peace." Sarah looked at James. "Second, Colonel Russo gets full recognition for his service. Whatever medals or honors were denied because of classification, he gets them. Third, when this is over, when Morrison is in prison and the witnesses are safe, I want my mother's real story told. Not the cover legend, not the lies, the truth about what she sacrificed." "Done," Graves said without hesitation. "Anything else?" "Yeah," Sarah's voice hardened. "I want Morrison to know who brought him down. I want him to know that Helen Donovan's daughter finished what her mother started. I want him to understand that we don't forget, and we don't forgive." Graves extended her hand. "Welcome to the Ghost Network, Sarah. Your mother would be proud." They spent the next 6 hours planning. Graves and her team had resources that made the official CIA look understated. Safe houses on 5 continents. Forgers who could create identities that would fool biometric databases. Extraction specialists who could move people across borders without leaving digital footprints. A parallel intelligence apparatus built from the survivors of 50 years of black operations. Sarah's role was coordinator. She would work with Graves' team to prepare for mass extractions once they recovered the real cold list. Some would resist. Some would refuse to believe the danger. Some would have to be convinced, coerced, or extracted against their will. It was brutal work, necessary work, the kind of work that would define the rest of her life. James watched her transform from analyst to operative with something like wonder in his eyes. This was what he'd been protecting her from, and this was what Helen had been preparing her for. The paradox of parenthood distilled to its essence. "You're better at this than I ever was," he said during a break. "I had good teachers." Sarah didn't look up from her planning. "And I'm not doing it alone. That was your mistake, Dad. Carrying everything by yourself, thinking you had to be the only one strong enough to bear the weight. It's a hard habit to break. Then break it. Sarah finally met his eyes. Because I'm going to need you, not as the cleaner, as my father, as someone who can teach me how to do this without losing myself in the process. James smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from him. I can do that. On the second day, they hit a complication. Graves's team had located the real cold list. It was stored in a secure facility in Chesapeake Bay, Morrison's personal residence. The deputy director had kept it close, using it as insurance, as leverage, as proof of his power over life and death. He goes there every weekend, Graves explained, showing them surveillance photos. 30 acres, private security. He thinks he's untouchable behind his walls and his guards. So we go through the walls, Russo said, studying the layout. Water approach, night insertion. We're in and out before anyone knows we're there. And then what? Sarah looked at her father. We take the list and run. Morrison will just claim it was stolen. He'll call us rogue. The machine protects itself. Then we don't just take the list, James said quietly. We make him confess. We record everything. And we broadcast it to every news outlet and congressional oversight committee simultaneously. We make him too toxic to protect, too radioactive for even his masters to touch. He'll never talk. He will, James said with certainty. Because I'm going to explain to Deputy Director Morrison exactly what it means to be visited by the cleaner. And I'm going to make him understand that death would be a mercy compared to what happens if he doesn't cooperate. They arrived at Chesapeake Bay at 2300 hours on the third day, the water black and cold beneath a moonless sky. Russo had acquired a small inflatable boat and military-grade night vision. They moved across the water in silence, three shadows in a world of shadows approaching Morrison's fortress from the one direction he wouldn't expect. The house loomed above them, all glass and steel and arrogant wealth, the kind of house built by men who believed they were above consequences. Sarah counted 6 guards on visible patrol, probably twice that many inside. Professional security, but not prepared for professionals with nothing left to lose. They beached the boat in a small cove, moved through manicured gardens that smelled of money and privilege. James let his movements fluid despite his age and injuries. Russo covered their 6. Sarah stayed center, her weapon ready, her heart steady. The first guard never knew what hit him. Russo's silenced pistol whispered and the man dropped. They dragged him into the shadows, continued forward. 2 more guards fell the same way. Quiet, professional. The kind of killing that James had spent a lifetime perfecting. They entered through a service entrance, moved through a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Marble counters, professional appliances, a wine collection worth more than most people's houses. The spoils of betrayal purchased with blood money. Morrison was in his study on the 2nd floor alone, working late on a laptop. He looked up as they entered, his face cycling through shock, fear, and finally resignation. He'd known this moment would come. Men like him always did. James Donovan, Morrison said, his voice steady. I wondered when you'd figure it out. I figured it out 2 years ago. James closed the door behind them. I've been waiting for you to make a mistake big enough that I could move against you. Thanks for the Baltimore operation. That was perfect. Morrison's eyes flicked to Sarah, recognition dawning. Helen's daughter. She really did teach you well, didn't she? I tried to warn her, told her to keep you out of the agency, but she insisted you had a right to choose your own path. Look where that choice led. It led here. Sarah kept her weapon trained on Morrison's chest. To the end of your operation, to the exposure of everyone you've been protecting. To justice, Bus. Justice, Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think this is about justice? You think any of this matters? I'm one man, Sarah. One small part of a system that's been running since before you were born. You cut me out, they'll just grow another. The machine doesn't stop. It just finds new operators. Then we'll take down the machine. Sarah pulled out a recording device, set it on Morrison's desk. But we start with you. Start talking. Every operation you've compromised. Every witness you've eliminated. Every order you've given to Volkov. All of it. Or what, you'll kill me. Morrison leaned back in his chair, almost relaxed. Go ahead, make me a martyr. Give them an excuse to classify everything I've done for the next 75 years. You'll accomplish nothing except your own destruction. We're not going to kill you, James said quietly. That would be too easy, too clean. No, Robert, you're going to live. You're going to stand trial. You're going to watch everything you've built crumble while you sit in a cell. And you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that you were brought down by a 65-year-old ghost and a 28-year-old analyst you thought you could manipulate. Something flickered in Morrison's eyes, not fear exactly, but uncertainty, the realization that he'd miscalculated. You have no proof, he said. Nothing that would survive in court. Sarah pulled out the thumb drive, held it up. We have everything. Financial records, communications, kill orders with your signature. We have Volkov's entire operation, and it all leads back to you. More importantly, we know where you've hidden the real cold list. We know it's in this house, and we're not leaving without it. Morrison's face went pale. He glanced involuntarily at a painting on the wall. A landscape. Expensive. Hiding something. James moved to the painting, lifted it off its hooks. Behind it was a safe. Biometric lock. Open it. Go to hell. James pulled out a knife. Not to threaten, to demonstrate. He placed the blade against Morrison's desk, applied pressure. The wood splintered. I've spent 28 years learning patience, Robert. Learning to build things instead of breaking them. But I remember how to break things very, very well. And I'm tired. And I'm angry. And my daughter is watching me to see if I'm still the monster I used to be. Don't make me prove that I am. Morrison stared at the knife. At James, at Sarah, he saw no mercy, no compromise. He'd spent his career making hard choices. Now he was on the receiving end. Fine, he said finally, but I want immunity, witness protection, a new life. You'll get a fair trial, Sarah said. That's all I can promise. That's more than you gave any of your victims. Morrison stood, walked to the safe, pressed his palm against the scanner. The lock clicked. Inside were files, hard copies, backup drives, and a leather-bound ledger that looked like it belonged in a museum. The original cold list, Morrison said, pulling it out. Not digital, not hackable. 217 names, current locations, current identities. Everything you need to destroy decades of intelligence work. Or to save 217 lives, Sarah countered. She took the ledger, handed it to James. Now talk, James said. Everything, on record. The names of everyone above you in the chain of command. Everyone who authorized the cleansing operation. Everyone who ordered the elimination of Cold War witnesses. Morrison looked at each of them, seeing no escape. If I do this, I'm dead within 24 hours. You're dead anyway, Russo said from the window. At least this way you get to choose whether you're remembered as a traitor or as someone who tried to make it right at the end. Morrison sank back into his chair. You want to know the truth, fine. I'll tell you everything, but not because I think it'll change anything. I'll tell you because I want you to understand just how deep this goes, just how impossible it is to fight. For the next 2 hours, Morrison talked. He named names. He detailed operations. He exposed a conspiracy that stretched from the highest levels of intelligence to elected officials who'd spent decades covering up Cold War atrocities. He gave them everything, not out of conscience, but out of spite. A final act of destruction aimed at the masters who'd failed to protect him. Sarah recorded every word, uploaded it to secure servers, sent copies to congressional oversight, to journalists, to whistleblower organizations. By dawn, the truth would be irreversible. The machine Morrison served would be exposed, its gears grinding to a halt under the weight of public scrutiny. When it was over, Morrison sat exhausted, his face gray. What happens now? Now we call the FBI, Russo said. Let them handle the arrest. Let the system do what it's supposed to do. The system failed. Morrison looked at Sarah. That's why men like me exist, because someone has to make the hard choices when the system breaks down. The system breaks down when men like you make it about power instead of principle. Sarah met his eyes without flinching. My mother understood that. My father understood that. And now I understand it too. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. But we don't murder witnesses to cover up the sins of previous generations. Your mother was naive. My mother was brave. Sarah's voice was steady now, certain. She believed that truth mattered more than expedience, that honor meant something even in the world of intelligence. She died believing that, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving she was right. Morrison had no response. There was nothing left to say. The FBI arrived 30 minutes later, led by agents from the Counterintelligence Division. They arrested Morrison on charges of conspiracy murder and treason. He went quietly, his head down, a man who'd gambled everything and lost. But before the agents led him away, Morrison turned back to Sarah. You should know something, Volkov. He's not what you think. The explosion in Baltimore, he survived, and he's been working with us to take him down. He wants out, wants protection. In exchange, he's giving us everything. Sarah's blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying your father was right. This was bigger than me, bigger than Volkov. We were both pawns. And the people pulling the strings, they're still out there. Still watching. This isn't over. Then the agents dragged him away, and he was gone. James, Sarah, and Russo slipped away before the agents could ask too many questions. They had their own extraction to coordinate their own disappearing act to perform. But first they had to confirm Morrison's last revelation. 2 hours after Morrison's arrest, news broke across every channel. Simultaneous FBI raids on Brighton Beach. Volkov's network stripped of its CIA protection, collapsing like a house of cards. And at the center of it all, Viktor Volkov himself in federal custody, looking remarkably calm for a man facing life in prison. Sarah watched the footage on her phone as they drove. Volkov being led to a black SUV, his face expressionless. But as he passed the cameras, he looked directly into the lens and smiled. He cut a deal, Russo said, just like Morrison said. Then who was he really working for, Sarah asked. That, James replied, is what we're going to find out. They drove through the dawn, watching the sun rise over the Chesapeake, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Russo was at the wheel. James rode shotgun. Sarah sat in back, exhausted, her body aching, her mind finally processing everything that had happened. Where do we go from here, she asked. James turned to look at her. Graves offered you a position, running operations for the Ghost Network, protecting the people who can't protect themselves. It's good work, Sarah, important work, but it's also the kind of work that consumes you. That takes everything and gives back very little except the knowledge that you made a difference. Sounds familiar? It is. It's the same choice your mother made, the same choice I made. We want you to choose differently, to have the life we never could. Sarah thought about her apartment in Arlington sitting empty and waiting. She thought about her desk at Langley, probably already cleaned out and reassigned. She thought about the woman she'd been 5 days ago, living a life built on lies and careful ignorance. That woman was gone, burned away in the fires of Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay. What remained was someone harder, someone who'd seen the machinery of power up close and understood that it needed constant maintenance by people willing to get their hands dirty. What was it you told me, Sarah asked her father? That knowing changes everything. Well, I know now. I know what we're up against. I know how high the stakes are. I know that there are 217 people who will be alive because we chose to fight. She leaned forward, her voice certain. So no, Dad, I'm not choosing differently. I'm choosing to finish what you and Mom started. I'm choosing to be part of the solution instead of pretending the problem doesn't exist. And I'm choosing to do it with you beside me. Not as the cleaner, not as a ghost, but as my father. James's eyes were wet. He reached back, took her hand. Helen would be so proud of you. She'd be proud of both of us. Sarah squeezed his hand, for finally figuring out what she knew all along, that we're stronger together than we ever were apart. Russo cleared his throat. Hate to interrupt this touching family moment, but we've got company. Sarah looked out the rear window. 3 black SUVs closing fast. Government vehicles. The kind that didn't need license plates because everyone knew who they belonged to. Graves said we'd have an escort, James said calmly. Guess she wasn't kidding. The SUVs surrounded them but didn't force them off the road. Instead, they formed a protective convoy, shepherding them through the morning traffic like a presidential motorcade, a show of force. A message to anyone watching: these people are protected now. Touch them and face consequences. They drove to a private airfield outside Baltimore. A Gulfstream waited on the tarmac, its engines already running. Graves stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking exactly like what she was, a woman who'd spent 50 years in the shadows and no longer bothered to hide it. Your ride to the new life, she said as they approached. Thought you might want to start somewhere with good weather. We're thinking New Zealand, far from Washington, far from anyone who might want revenge, far enough to breathe. For how long, Sarah asked. As long as you want. This is a gift, not an assignment. You've earned rest. Graves looked at James. You especially. 47 missions, 28 years in exile. You've paid your debts 100 times over. James glanced at Sarah, then back at Graves. What about the Ghost Network? Don't you need operators? We always need operators, but we need them healthy and whole, not running on spite and old wounds. Graves handed Sarah a satellite phone. Take 6 months, learn to be a family again. When you're ready, if you're ready, call me. We'll put you to work, but on your terms this time, as partners, not assets. Sarah looked at the plane, then at her father, then at Russo. What about you, Colonel? You coming with us? Russo shook his head. Got 3 grandchildren in Boston who think their grandfather sells insurance. Time I went back to being boring for a while. He extended his hand to James. Been an honor, brother. Let's not wait another 30 years to do this again. James pulled him into a hug. Thank you, Frank, for everything, for Berlin, for believing in me when nobody else would, for keeping your word. That's what soldiers do. Russo released him, turned to Sarah. Take care of him. He's too stubborn to take care of himself. I noticed. Russo climbed into one of the SUVs. The convoy departed, leaving just Sarah, James, and Graves on the empty tarmac. The Gulfstream's engines hummed with possibility. One more thing, Graves said. She handed Sarah a file folder. Your mother's service record, the real one? Everything she did for the Ghost Network. Everything she sacrificed. She asked me to give this to you if you ever joined us. Said you had a right to know the truth. Sarah opened the folder, saw her mother's face in a photograph from 30 years ago. Young, determined, beautiful. The file detailed operations Sarah had never heard of, risks Helen had taken, lives she'd saved. A career spent in shadows protecting people who would never know her name. At the bottom of the file, a handwritten note. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you made the same choice I did. I'm so sorry, baby. I wanted better for you. Wanted you to have the life I couldn't. But I'm also so proud. You're braver than I ever was, stronger than you know. Remember, the work matters, but so do you. Don't lose yourself in the shadows like I almost did. Keep the light alive. Keep fighting. Keep hoping. I love you. Always have. Always will. Mom. Sarah read it twice. Her vision blurred, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. James held her hand while she stood there mourning and celebrating, ending one chapter and beginning another. Finally, Sarah wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. Let's go home. They boarded the plane. The door closed. The engines roared. And as they lifted into the sky, leaving America behind, Sarah looked out the window at the landscape shrinking below. All those secrets, all those all those necessary evils that men like Morrison had justified as the price of security. Maybe there was another way. Maybe the Ghost Network could be something different. Not an assassination bureau, not a cleanup crew, but a shield. Protection for those who'd carried the weight. Justice for those who'd been wronged. Maybe. If people like her were willing to do the work. The flight to New Zealand took 18 hours. Sarah spent most of it reading her mother's file, memorizing every operation, every risk, every choice Helen had made in service of something larger than herself. James slept, his face peaceful for the first time in 28 years. No more running, no more hiding, no more waits. They landed in Auckland at dawn, the sky brilliant with possibility. A car waited to take them to a house on the coast far from cities and cameras and consequences. A place where they could be, James and Sarah, instead of the cleaner and his daughter. A place where families could heal. The house was everything promised. White sand beaches, clear water, silence broken only by waves and seabirds. They spent the first week doing nothing, sleeping, eating, walking the beach, learning how to be around each other without the weight of missions and secrets pressing down. James taught Sarah how to build furniture, his hands guiding hers through the careful work of joining wood. She taught him about modern technology, showed him how his world had changed while he'd been hiding from it. They talked about Helen, shared memories, filled in gaps, built a narrative of their family that included all the contradictions and complexities. On the 8th day, Sarah's satellite phone rang. She looked at James, who nodded. She answered. Sarah Donovan. It's Graves. Just wanted to give you an update. Morrison's trial started yesterday. Full media coverage. Congressional oversight is launching investigations into the cleansing operation. 17 senators are demanding answers. The machine you exposed is tearing itself apart. Good. More than good. It's a revolution. People are asking questions they should have asked decades ago. Your mother's story broke yesterday, front page of the Times. They're calling her a hero, calling you both heroes. Sarah looked out at the ocean, watched waves break against the shore in their eternal rhythm. We're not heroes, Elizabeth. We're just people who did what needed doing. That's exactly what makes you heroes. Graves paused. Final update, all 217 are safe. Last extraction finished 3 hours ago. Your mother's network held. Every single person she helped protect is now beyond Morrison's reach. She'd be proud, Sarah. You finished what she started. Sarah felt something release in her chest, a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Thank you. When you're ready, we have wash for you. Nothing urgent, nothing that requires you to sacrifice your life again, but important work, the kind your mother would have wanted you to do. I'll call you, Sarah said. When we're ready. She ended the call, set the phone aside. James appeared with 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. They stood on the porch together watching the sun rise over the Pacific. "You gonna take Graves up on her offer?" James asked. "Eventually, when I've figured out how to do the work without becoming the work." Sarah sipped her coffee. "What about you? Think you can stay retired this time?" "I don't know. Part of me will always be the cleaner. That's not something you just walk away from." James smiled. "But another part of me, a bigger part, is just a father who wants to know his daughter, who wants to make up for lost time, who wants to prove that ghosts can come back to life." "Then prove it." They stood in silence, watching the light change, watching the world wake up. Two survivors of a Cold War that had never really ended. Two people who'd chosen truth over comfort, sacrifice over safety. Two members of a family that had been broken and was slowly knitting itself back together. In 6 months, Sarah would call Graves. She'd accept the position with the Ghost Network. She'd spend the next decade protecting witnesses, exposing corruption, fighting the same battles her parents had fought. But she'd do it differently, with support, with her father beside her, with the knowledge that she wasn't alone. James would consult Teach Pass on the skills that had kept him alive through 47 missions. But he'd never kill again. That chapter was closed, written in blood and regret, and finally laid to rest. Together they'd build something new. Not a legacy of violence, not an inheritance of secrets, but a commitment to the kind of justice that survived scrutiny, the kind of honor that meant something even when no one was watching. Helen would have approved. The sun cleared the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of gold. A new day, a new life, a new chance to get it right. Sarah raised her coffee cup. To Mom, to everything she taught us, to everything she believed in. James touched his cup to hers, to Helen. Who knew all along that we'd find our way back to each other? Who bet everything on love being stronger than fear? They drank to memory, to survival, to the future. And in the morning light of a new world, the daughter of the cleaner and the ghost of the Cold War stood together, finally at peace, finally home. The war was over, but the work would never end. And that was exactly how it should be.